Rocket ship, go now. Hello, I am Robert Ogilvy, Executive EQ Coach, and you are watching the Leadership Lunchtime live stream. Why don't I actually position my camera at a reasonable height so that we can see each other? Oh, hello. Okay, so today's topic, what do you need to make both fast and effective decisions? Okay, uh, so before I go into what it is, let me just talk about why there's typically this tension. Okay, so you guys might have heard of fast and slow thinking, or I think it has another technical term in the literature. It's like, I can't remember if it's track A or track B or track one and track two, but it's dealing with the notion of heuristics and biases versus kind of full concentration. And the way it's generally framing it is something like this, right? The more you're going off of fast processes, the more you're using, you could think of stereotypes, heuristics, templates, biases, some existing kind of rough sense of things, which kind of gets the job done, but maybe isn't high quality, versus the more effort and concentration and time you put in, the more you can think deeply and fully and slowly. But it is just that it's deep and slow, right? So how can you have the best of both worlds? Um, it's through flow states, but here's actually what it requires: a well-developed mental model. You need to know what the hell you're doing, and maybe even mental model is too cerebral a way of framing this, right? You could think of it as you need to be highly practiced. You need to even be masterful at that thing for you to be able to be both fast and effective. Okay, so I'm going to unpack a little bit more why that is so, and why that sometimes is counterintuitive to us, right? Um, we, really, in that first way I framed it up, kind of fast versus slow thinking, there's a bit of a kind of a faux even-handedness there, right? That each have their strengths and weaknesses, right? Actually, long term, you can have both, because you can actually build up the model so that you're able to be fast and be effective. And just because someone is thinking slowly doesn't actually mean they're thinking better. Seriously, check in. We have all known people, or maybe ourselves, we ourselves have been victims of this, where we're thinking slowly on something, but we're no better. We could be ruminating and kind of circling through the same stuff a lot. There's not enough action. And often I would say there's not even a regard for that we even care that much about the results, right? I mean, think of it. When you are deeply connected to the results and you care about the results, or it impacts you in a very direct way, we tend to want to perform better, right? We have skin in the game. This is more compelling and engaging for us, right? If we don't care about the results, if our bread and butter is coming from somewhere else, if the results don't matter, and it's kind of throwaway learning and experimentation and play in the most floofy, whimsical sense of the word, yeah, we just don't give a damn, right? Um, but actually, if we develop um, high quality mental models, we can move fast and effectively. So you see bits of this in people that get really into practice and discipline, like you see this in martial arts. You see this in most athletes, and I know those both have a physical tone, but really anyone that wants to get masterful at something needs to practice it. And so I know you've heard me say this in other videos. Here's another indicator of how our performance is going up. In the early to midterm, more experience in that thing will make us better, will make us perform better, right? So there's a linear relationship in the early to mid stages of developing acumen at something. But then in the mid to far end stages, that tapers off, and then what you actually see coming up is more what they will call reflexivity, which is just a fancy way to say you can reflect well, you can take in feedback well, you can think well. And really, once you can wrap your brain around this, you get into the full formal operational stage of it, where you can just like think of scenarios without even having to actually execute, and be like learn just from thinking through options and choices, right? You want someone like that, right? And really, that's often, I would say, the mark of when we come to a professional in any domain, that we can throw, potential problems, theoretical problems at them, and they can quickly orient to them, and they can quickly give you, yeah, you want to do things like blah and blah, you don't want to do things like blah and blah, right? Oh, are they working sloppily? They're going so fast. No, they have a ton of experience, right? Implicitly, a lot of our professional designations are kind of betting on this, right? You've done your training to get into that, and then you have 3, 4, 5,000 contact hours. Some of them are a lot more than that. And they're basically assuming, listen, if you got 5,000, or I guess the magic number from that Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers is 10,000 hours of practice. And some people have tried to kind of refute that, or it's 10,000 hours of good practice. So there's a certain caliber of concentration and engagement you need for that to be full value. It's not about per se some magic number, but there is this ongoing relationship of how do you develop mastery in something, right? So there's a lot of ways to frame and break down what that mastery is and how much is this a personal or behavioral habit, how much is this kind of a motivation habit to keep something up and engaged, which starts to get into facets of grit. But in this sense, what I'm actually talking about is how developed is your mental model? How well can you orient to things? So you may have heard me mention in other videos, when we're dealing kind of Plutchik's wheel and emotions. What's the value of anticipation or excitement versus what's the value of being surprised, right? So excitement is in my mind, I think of it as, particularly if we're looking at curiosity, it would be key to the aspect of curiosity, which is part of joyous exploration. So that's one of the facets of it. That's the thing that lets you hone in on a particular detail. Say, well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Let's play with that. Give me more details. That's great. But it's engaging. So it's an extroverted cognition in its approach behavior. It pulls you towards that thing physically or mentally, right? Oh yeah, tell me more about that. That's exciting. Oh yeah, give me more data, right? The surprise response is just the opposite. It's an introverted cognition. It forces reflection, and it's basically like, whoa, some combination of phenomena is surprising. It's disorienting, and I need to get reoriented to it. Right? I mentally need to accommodate and adapt and try to wrap my brain around this. Right? And if it's in a relatively contained space, it might just be what was this new thing that just happened, or the more complex and surprising it is, the more frazzling about why this is happening, the root causes of why this is happening, the more it might take a lot of mastery and orientation to be like, what? No, seriously, what the hell just happened, right? We like that in a good thriller movie when 60, 80, 90 minutes in, there are these twists happening that we didn't see coming, and we're going like this because we're like, oh, that takes all the data points I know and reorients them in this whole new crazy way, right? Oh, I thought this person I liked, we can't trust them, or I thought this person I couldn't trust is a different thing. I remember me and Melissa just finished watching a show about King Arthur and Nimue and the fairies and Merlin and things like that. And so one of the twists at the end is that this bad guy character kind of turns coat and is able to help one of the other Fae escape. But then you find out the bad guy with the kind of dark hood and two swords is Lancelot, who we know for his his fighting prowess, but also his passion, right? And then the young kid he saves is Percival, a knight that we know for honor and duty, even in the face of great challenge, right? And totally different ways of describing it. But you're like, oh, okay, I can see a bit of that character there in them, right? But it's a fun switcheroo. Anyway, mental models. And how do you develop good mental models? Lots of practice, lots of mastery, getting really good at your OODA loops. There's a whole other video that we could actually do on this, but I'll just briefly touch on this now. What is an OODA loop? There's a few different models which basically rehash the same thing. When Electica uses this model, they call it virtuous cycles of learning, VCALs, but it's the same basic thing. So in the OODA loop, and it stands for OODA, so that stands for observe, orient, decide, act. Okay? So the observe is like the bit-by-bit details and data collection. The orient is like sense make and piece together what the hell is going on or why it matters. The decide has to do with figuring out kind of what you're going to do about it. And honestly, deciding and evaluating, making decisions is much more emotional and motivational than you may think. And here's why. It needs to take things into account. So there is a place for, you could think of it as like totally cold objective thinking, but there's also very much a place for the vested interests of like, what's going to have the long-term interests of me and my team, and depending on your context, my organization, my family, my city, my my way of thinking, my industry, etc. Right? That's actually good. That's your own consequential thinking coming out that lets you forecast out further, and it's your own sense of ethics and sustainability. And then the last part, the A part of the OODA loop is the action, and then it's a loop, right? So we need all of these to learn. We generally tend to favor some of them more than others, but this is what learning is. Um, so how does a mental model help with that? It particularly helps with the orienting end of things because you can quickly get a sense of things. So the reason this is, at its full peak in a flow state is that, so there's a lot of ways to slice and dice what a flow state is. Classically, Csikszentmihalyi would say that there's 9 criteria, one of them being there's a sense of merging of action and awareness. So what that actually means is that there is very little gap between the observation, the data coming in, and the getting oriented, the sense making to, why is this important, or what does this mean, or how should I apprehend this, and then allows to proceed to the decision and action, right? Versus, back to that whole kind of excitement versus kind of being stunned and disoriented, right? If you were disoriented every time there was a bit of data and you were kind of frozen or didn't know what to do, you couldn't be in a flow state because you're wanting to act would constantly be at odds with your I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I'm disoriented. Is this good? Is this bad? What should I do? So I just want to clarify it. Flow states do not have to be a physical sport-like thing. I think we just happen to use that analogy because it's something easy and physical that most people to some degree can relate to. Really, flow states at their best become ever more cerebral and collaborative, but we want to keep that feedback loop, that cycle of observing, oriented, deciding, and acting. We want to keep that as tight as possible. So that's a personal challenge in terms of our own processes, and that is it's a context challenge in terms of the team and the work context around us. I've gone far too long. I've gone for 11 and a half minutes, so I better wrap this thing up. I've broken my own rules. I'm supposed to keep it under 10 minutes so I can actually share this in enough places, so my apologies. Okay, so again, what do you need to be fast and effective? You need a good mental model. How do you develop that? Mastery, a lot of practice. That's how you develop a good mental model, including the practice of forcing yourself to decide, forcing yourself to do something and learn from it as fast as possible, as opposed to this, trapped in disorientation, right? That's it. I might do this again sometime in a bit more fast, coherent, maybe more fast and effective manner once I'm more oriented to the data. But anyway, love you guys. Again, Robert Ogilvy, Executive EQ Coach. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please, I welcome them. If you have any concerns, please, I welcome them. If you have any doubts, I welcome them too. I think that's basically it. I hope to see you guys again. Again, be masterful, practice, build up your mental models, and then you can be fast and effective too. See you guys.